Josh Battle is playing Hock ball in 2025 and beyond. As a free agent, he has departed the St Kilda Football Club and he will now play for the Hawks in 2025 and beyond. But what does it mean for the club he's departed, the club he's landed at, and for those of us that play AFL Fantasy, Supercoach, Keeper and Dream Team? What does it mean in 2025? We'll talk about that on this episode as we review another free agency player movement. Let's talk about Josh. He started his career as kind of a third tall and never really got moving at the Saints as a key position or as a mobile forward. He's really discovered himself a few years ago when he moved back and certainly has found himself at home as an intercept, as a playmaker, and at times a key position lockdown defender. He's definitely done a good job in that spot for the Saints, and they're probably a little disappointed to see him go. We know that to be true by the fact they said politely, don't even bother turning up to the club best and fairest. Regardless, he is on the move and he adds some handy dimensions to the Hawks, and we'll talk about them in a moment at what it means. But for the Saints, this really opens up a bunch of different options for them. We know Callum Wilkie is their star tall defender. A great pickup for them. Club best and fairest now. Spent some time in and around that all-Australian capabilities over a number of seasons now. And the question I think that St Kilda have is, do we want Callum to be the lockdown tall, or do we want to continue to allow him to play the intercepting option? Because that does determine a lot about how they structure up this gap in the side with Battle out. Do they go back to the well with a Dougal Howard, who's probably not developed in the way that they had hoped he would come on, given the high price they paid for him at the trade table a handful of years ago now? It's just not quite got to the pinnacle that they'd hoped. So do they go back to the well with Dougal? Do they give Sharman an opportunity, who spent the preseason that was just gone developing as a key position defender? Maybe. Is it Schoenmaker, the way they get him into the side is a little bit more structurally locked down, while his number one weapon is his booming boot? Is this the way they can get him more consistently into the side? Or do they do something else? They've got some really nice pieces in this defensive six. Nasiah Wanganeen-Miller, nowhere near a key position defender, but an absolute A-grade star in my eyes. Of not there yet, but definitely trending towards it. Could see him being one of the best rebounding and run and carry defenders in the league. Wilkie, I've mentioned, all Australian caliber on any given year. While Jack Sinclair, in and out of the midfield and half back, but when he's off halfback, creates some elite run and skill. So just these three pieces alone, and by the way, I haven't mind Stocker as a lockdown role. They've got some pieces. Webster, when he's fit, is solid citizen, but they've got three almost, if not A-grade talents in Sinclair, Wilkie, and Wanganeen-Miller to build around. But what do they do? And I think that's the great question. They're not linked to any key position defenders in the coming and, well, now existing trade period. Do they draft one early? I don't think so. While there are some decent key position options in the draft, it does seem at least those earlier picks are more favourable to their midfield, and arguably that's another area of improvement for this club too. So there's a number of different ways they can pursue this different structurally. Is Sharman the go? Do they go back to Howard? Do they play a young kid in Schoenmaker out of position a little bit, but hope that it's the way of getting them into the side? I'm not too sure. So keep an eye on this space for St Kilda, because if it's not a Sharman, if it's not a Howard, a new opportunity is going to arise that may have some potential fantasy football implications for us in 2025. From a Hawthorn perspective, this is a great get for them. Just salary cap space, but adding to their key position stocks. They've had some decent options back there. I think Frost is a really solid citizen. Sicily is A-grade. But outside of those two, they've really been lacking. And I think what the addition of Battle and the probable inclusion of Barras at time of recording, he's requested trade, but nothing's locked in. Let's assume they get both, and I think they do. This adds great depth to this Hawthorn side. They've really needed Sicily to hold this key and this entire defensive unit together over a number of years. Even this year, at times when they were under siege, it was his ability to set up the play, to intercept, to control the tempo of the game has been critical piece to their success. So with Battle coming in, what does that mean for a Frost and a Sicily? I think what it does enable is it gives them the option, should they choose to take it, to do what Sam Mitchell has done a number of times throughout 2025, and that is to play James Sicily forward. In games, especially in the final quarter where they were desperately needing a key forward and a marking target inside forward 50, Sicily would go forward and change the makeup of the game. In 2 or 3 instances, including that lost semi-final, where if he kicks straight, they're through to the prelim, by the way. He was the difference maker in winning games for Hawthorn. Sicily started his career as a forward too. Does he take all the craft and skill and knowledge that he's developed over the past decade or so and bring that into the forward line? They've got elite small forwards. Now they just need a consistent marking forward presence that if he can't mark it, can bring it to ground. And Sicily does that really, really well. I think Battle and Barrass coming in enables the move of Sicily to go forward. Yes, you're losing out in your defensive line, but the Barrass and Battle combination actually combined enables them to be at a net win, and now they can win with a Sicily move forward. So my forecast is that Battle enables the releasing of Sicily to go forward, and overall they end up, Hawthorn, in a stronger, tall position across the front half and the back half of the ground. What does this mean for us in fantasy? Well, he's had a really good season. Like, there's some 110-plus scores through there. There's, 7 Supercoach tons, 4 AFL Fantasy and Dream Team tons this year, and a mid-70s average in fantasy and a low to mid-80s average in Supercoach, which is fine. But these are not averages that are classic relevant. St Kilda, maybe not as much as Hawthorn, but do love to play that transition ball across half-back, do love to control the tempo of the game through uncontested possessions. And for Battle to become relevant in classic or salary cap formats, we need to see him and a pathway where he can take that mid-70s average in fantasy, mid-80s average in Supercoach to be relevant, up 15 points per game, to scratch the surface of around the mark of a top 10 defender. I just don't see that happening for Josh. You throw in Battle as a nice piece, but Barrass in there, there's some possession and intercepts. They've got some nice rebounders that run and carry the ball already, and they looked at their best when they moved the ball fast off halfback and not slow transition marking. And so I think as good as Battle could be for us, I don't see a pathway for him going from delivering similar numbers to what he did at St Kilda to a 15 points per game jump at Hawthorn. So in Classic, he's irrelevant to me, barring something drastically changing in this defensive makeup and the way that Hawthorn move the ball outside of defensive 50. In drafts, he's worth a late shot to me. Again, I don't see him being more than what he is, which is at times he has to play completely locked down and struggles to get to 60 or 70. Other times gets high volume of intercept marks. The ball just happens to kind of magnetize to him on those days. He gets the right opponent that he can outbody and outmark. The right matchups come, and he can be a handy, depending on the matchup, a really good pickup off the player pool and waiver wire. So depending on the depth in your draft league, I don't mind him. He'll play all but injury or suspension every single week. He's best 22, and he does have a ceiling, but he's not someone I'd love to have on field, depending on the depth of my league. So draft, there's some relevance, feels a strong term, but there's some reason to be interested in selecting him, but it wouldn't be outside anywhere other than what his current average would allow him. So you're picking him around the players at a similar space without any probable significant scoring growth. So solid enough to be on your list, but if you play draft for a number of years, you know Battle's in and out of the player pool a lot of the year, depending on the size of your league. And I think he's probably going to land in a similar position in 2025 of scoring to what he did in 2024. I think the biggest win here is the opportunity it could create for us in the St Kilda backline and how they move the ball and who gets the scoring opportunity to watch that space. And also the freeing up of Sicily to move forward, which in my eyes would make him irrelevant in any format of the game next year. That could be the biggest fantasy implication. But do you agree or disagree with my take on Josh Battle? If you're watching this on YouTube, comment below and let me know what you think the implications are, not only for Josh, but for the team he's landed at and the team he's departed. If you're tuning in on this across an audio podcast, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Every single player that moves clubs across the trade and free agency period, we will be reviewing them as well. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. You can keep in touch with us across social media with all the links in the description of this episode. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and we can't wait to be back with you again very, very soon, talking about all the player movements of the 2024 trade and free agency period.